welcome to the second in our series of webinars on sustainability in FM. So today, following on, I suppose, from last month's conversation, we're going to look a little bit more around the technology and what technology is going to enable the change in sustainability. So, you know, we need to go on this journey of change. One of the key things that's going to enable us to actually, you know, drive towards decarbonization, reduce kilowatt output, and really meet some of the sustainability goals and objectives that are now going to come from, you know, both legislative drives, but also the likes of COP26. And as they transfer into actions, something has to happen. And for me, key to that is going to be technology. So I've got 4 fantastic panelists joining us today, 3 of which are, you know, Irish companies that are R&D development in country, looking at how you can actually have a more sustainable and an improved, I suppose, carbon footprint. And I'm going to introduce those. So we've got Peter Murphy joining us from ZiggyTec, Tony OKeefe from OPNBuildings. We've got Paul Walsh from CIM, and I suppose Paul Farrell is here from Apleona, also leading the way in what they're doing. Bigger organization, multinational, but you know, in the FM industry and really driving sustainability and helping clients to go on that journey. So welcome, guys. It's great to have you here today to run through this and to really understand, I suppose, where the industry is going from a technology point of view. If we're going to get to sustainability and ultimately sustainability is going to be part of the FM industry going forward, where is technology coming in and what are the barriers around that? So we'll get into that, but I suppose just to start, if we can go around to each of you, just maybe you can give an introduction of, you know, what you're doing, your own role in your company, and also I suppose the technology, what are you using from a technology point of view, and you know, is it something that you see as working, and what's the feedback on the ground? So Paul, if I go to you, Paul Farrell, if I go to you first, I suppose, you know, big player, big organization, what are you seeing, and what's your role, and how are you finding things?
Okay, so thank you, Bernard, for the invitation. So I'll just introduce myself. I'm the Associate Director of Engineering and Energy Services. So what we're seeing as a large integrated FM provider is certainly on the client side, there's a growing awareness of their obligations. On the statutory side, there are a lot of requirements now starting to come towards businesses in terms of responsibility, I suppose, and having to meet targets. And from a corporate perspective then, on our larger clients, there will be a driver from the investor side with regards to their ESG programs and the transparency of those. So, but as an FM provider then, in bringing engineering expertise towards the problem, what are we doing? Well, we have our own research center based in Frankfurt. So we develop products across a whole spectrum of activities, from waste management, security, catering, energy management, automated bill reading. We have our own in-house R&D department to look for or develop the specific solutions that our clients require, is one part of it. We're also out in the space of, I suppose, negotiating on energy supply for them as well, in the renewable space and in the traditional fossil fuel space. So, you know, contract renewals for gas, electricity, but we're also out in the renewable space doing PPAs as well for them. And I suppose what we're seeing, if I had to summarize a challenge for it, there's a cost to expertise, which I believe the client doesn't want to take on because they don't want to train their own people to do it. There is a cost to the industry to provide that expertise, and the disconnect is on, if you like, the value proposition that IFM has traditionally been seen in, which in the past would have been a race to the bottom. We've had many years of cost stripping coming out of it. So you've got kind of two competing objectives here. The client's trying to drive it down. Yeah.
Okay, so we'll come back to that in terms of that challenge, but just conscious, Paul Walsh,
Sure.
Do you want to come in here, just give an overview again from CIM in your own role?
Yeah, so thanks, Bernard. My name is Paul Walsh. I'm the General Manager for CIM EMEA, and we've developed a data analytics software platform that helps people operate their buildings at peak performance, and that delivers an economic, but more importantly, an environmental benefit for our clients. And yeah, we're working specifically in high-tech manufacturing across Ireland and the UK, and we have a lot of assets that are in commercial, office space, and retail as well.
Very good, very good. Tony, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Tony OKeefe. I'm the CEO of OPNBuildings. We bring data transparency to building operations. We help facility managers, energy managers to better understand how their buildings are performing, where the opportunities are to improve indoor conditions, to reduce their carbon footprint, and to help them better manage the equipment and systems in the HVAC okay. That deliver on that comfort level and consume that energy. So we're working with a number of clients in the office, university, public sector across Ireland.
Very good. And Peter, do you want to come in, tell us a little bit about ZiggyTec?
Hi, Bernard. ZiggyTec, I'm the founding director of ZiggyTec, which has been in business now nearly 4 years. ZiggyTec is in the business of getting accurate, reliable, and consistent utility data out of buildings and into the cloud. The reason we're doing that is that, like, commercial property owners that have large portfolios of commercial buildings now have to comply with increasingly rigorous ESG reporting obligations. So we all know there's GRESB, LEEDs, BREEAM. In the UK, there's the Streamline Energy carbon reporting. And as of March this year, the EU has brought in new sustainable finance disclosure regulations. So there's a raft of regulations. And in fact, the amount of reporting that these commercial property owners have to do is starting to swamp the financial reporting, okay? And our business is, to do this, they need to know how much water, gas, electricity, heat has been used in hundreds of buildings across their portfolio. And that's what the business we're in. We cover, we buildings right across Europe that we get the data out. And we use our own technology, IoT technology, using narrowband IoT, Sigfox, to go from the building straight into the cloud.
Very good, very good. So again, thanks guys for coming on and for sharing your knowledge today. And I suppose what I want to get to today is to understand, you know, we've talked there about the legislative changes that are coming, you know, investors now requiring that there's a oversight and reporting and analytics of sustainability goals and objectives. You know, it's the IoT technology. I said previously, I'm not a fan of the term smart buildings. You know, I think, you know, I'm an engineer by heart, and you know, good engineering is done in a way that's sustainable. So from a sustainability point of view, are you seeing it? So, you know, you're all in this marketplace. Are you seeing sustainability on the lips of clients? Is it something that is, you know, greenwashing at the moment? Or are you seeing actual real decisions being made to go on a journey from a client perspective? Tony, we'll jump in with you first. You know, the marketplace, is there an appetite and is it changing for sustainability now?
Yeah, can I just touch on one point you made there around smart buildings? And I think you're spot on there. I think smart buildings, it's almost unhelpful in that there's so many variations, so many different perspectives on what a smart building is. So you know, it depends on your perspective, your position in an organization. You'd be an occupant or a manager, but it's not a helpful term. But definitely from a customer perspective, people are looking for energy management solutions now. They're looking to, they see the carbon reporting requirements coming down the line, I suppose the pressure that's going to come on them in that regard, and they're looking for solutions now. Certainly over the last year and a half to 2 years, a lot of things have been allowed slide, or we've been distracted for obvious reasons. And people are really looking to, I suppose, pull up their socks now, and there's a big focus. We're definitely seeing a big focus around understanding the energy consumption in the building and finding technology solutions to help them make improvements. So that people are coming to us looking for, it might be an energy metering solution. But for us, energy metering is just one data stream. It shouldn't be siloed into a energy management package. It's as valuable as your BMS data. It's as valuable as the temperature sensors in your space. It's as valuable as a people counter on the front of your building or within your building. So all of that data is valuable, and it helps you better understand how your building is performing and where the opportunities lie to reduce your carbon footprint or improve the operational performance of your equipment and so on.
Paul Walsh, are you seeing the same from your point of view from clients, or is it a little bit different? Again, you're probably in slightly bigger game in terms of like data centers and manufacturing, and probably geographically broader. Again, is there commonality in it, or are you seeing different requirements from different clients in different industries?
Yeah, no, I think we're seeing exactly what Tony is seeing there, maybe in slightly different building or sort of asset classes. But I think what a lot of our clients, and this is probably common to everyone on the webinar here, is that our clients are entering the perfect storm here, where they need to deliver OPEX reduction on the back of COVID. They need to deliver energy and CO2 reduction, based on the sustainability initiatives or goals that their parent company have signed up for. And then the availability of CapEx is a challenge, again, in the current post-COVID climate. So when you look at facility managers or building owners or building operators, they're often been challenged with this task, but it seems to be from diametrically opposing parts of the business. So I suppose what we're seeing is, and it's the primary agenda of the discussion, is how technology is helping deliver all these, making more or doing more with less, really, taking the data that's residing on existing buildings, getting what you have on site to work correctly, and doing that in an OPEX model where they don't have to, invest capital, is a very attractive proposition for most building owners, and that's what we're seeing as the primary go-to market for our business. And I think we're getting busy as a result, and we see it out there, to answer your question, Bernard, right through the sector, that companies are now realizing that they have to make a move. They want to make the most financially attractive move possible, in that they don't want to have to deploy capital to become sustainable.
Okay, very good. And Peter or Paul, are you saying, Peter, I'll jump to you first, are you seeing anything different, or again, are you in line with Tony and Paul there?
So our main clients have always been the owners of commercial buildings, and I would say that I went off the ball probably for the last year and a half. There's been more pressing needs, and it's coming back. But really interestingly, what I'm seeing is the tenants within those buildings are now coming to us. So we've noticed in the last few months that tenants, and these are people that don't even own the buildings, that have no idea of how it runs, but have to start reporting on their ESG. And they're coming to us to help them with gathering energy information, waste, water, heat, cooling flows. So there's a lot of people looking to install heat meters to measure the cold water supplies and hot water supplies going into the tenants' demise. So it's starting to spread through, because these people are being pushed down this avenue of ESG reporting for when they tender for business.
Okay, so that's one thing, and Paul, Farrell, I'd like to bring you in this. One of the things that I've seen, and I suppose talking with people over, is that dissemination of responsibility, ownership, and accountability starting to spread from just big corporates and the big public sector organizations. It's starting to cascade, and even down into now where there's pressure coming from the bottom up, where now you're getting employees and organizations challenging. We know the employment market at the moment is crazy. You can't get people for love nor money. So it's the employees now are picking and choosing who they're going to work for, and part of that is, well, is that employer hitting the sustainability objectives that individual has in terms of their values, core values? So are you seeing that? And Paul, Farrell, I'll jump to you on this. Are you seeing that in the terms of service providers, that clients are now talking about, well, our employees want us to go on this journey, so we have to listen to them because it's important at that level? And so it's not just top-down legislation. There's now, I suppose, a movement coming from the ground force up as well.
I think, not to duck your question, but I think there's probably a degree of buy-in coming at the lower level in the organizations. But I think the direction of travel on the compass, be it for the business or the corporate, is being determined still by the captain on the bridge. It's going to be driven from the top down. I've seen enough sustainability proposals over the years that came from the bottom up, completely founder on the rocks, because there was no corporate policy to implement them. You were competing for capital with the next process machine, whereas you may have been, coming up with a sustainability initiative. So the capital pool was somewhat contentious. Some companies, as they matured, set up, if you like, ring-fenced green funds to try and help the penetration of sustainability. Again, those were corporate decisions. They weren't made by the staff at the bottom end. But I think there is a message there, that when the company does, if you like, commit to heading down the sustainability route, there is a very important communication message has to be successfully passed down through the corporate body, right down through its all of its levels, in order to get the buy-in from staff for these changes to become effective. Because I think the people on the ground are the consumers. They are the consumers of the energy, the power, the water. They're making the product. They're the boots on the ground. If you create an enabling environment for them from a corporate perspective and harness the power of their imaginations, you'll get a better result in your sustainability program.
Yeah, so it's really about getting those people on the journey with you and using them to enable the change as well. So I want to, before there's two things I think we've touched on there a couple of times, was that capital cost, and I want to come back to that, and I want to particularly come back to, like, as the challenge with FM and clients, because we've sort of talked about both, but there's an industry challenge around that. But before we get into those barriers, I want to talk a little bit for what are the technologies. So again, you've given me the pitch in terms of a high level of what you're doing, and without getting into maybe specific clients, but if you can give me some real tangible examples of something that's reduced carbon, or that is actually delivered on sustainability. Because there's a lot of people, again, go back to Tony's comment earlier on, smart buildings doesn't help. It's a catch-all, and it means that there's nothing particularly, well, what is it? And there's people listening today are probably still going, I still don't know what the technology is. What would I need to do if I was a building owner or an FM? What do I need in terms of technology that will actually take carbon out of my building or out of my manufacturing process, or will take energy out of it? So again, if we just go around and, like, what do you think are that technology? What's the technical part of it? And let's stay on the technical side, and we'll flip into, I suppose, the bigger picture again afterwards. So Paul, from here, like, as in, we've got 3 companies here that have R&D in Ireland, and Apleona, or Apleona, we've already heard in terms of, the work they're doing in Frankfurt. So Paul, what are you doing in terms of development? What's the technology that actually will make the difference today and going forward next couple of years? What's coming down the line that is going to even enhance that technology?
Paul Farrell, is it? Or
sorry, no, Paul Walsh there.
Oh, sorry. So I suppose what we're seeing is, I suppose the good news, if you like to start on a positive note, is that buildings are currently already generating gigabytes of information. And the challenge we've seen is that they can often be legacy systems, lack of interconnectivity, proprietary systems. So getting access to that data can be a challenge, Bernard. And what a technology like ours, or like, a good data analytics solution provider will do, is help unlock that and allow building owners to optimize their existing plant and equipment without having to deploy any additional resources.
So it's really that data harvesting is the first, and pulling that to be able to, data is useless until you actually take it out and start doing it, and you turn it into, information. But knowledge then comes afterwards, when you actually apply that information with something intelligent to actually say, I'm doing something with it now that'll make a change.
Yeah, because that in of itself is of no good to an FM company or to a facility manager who working a building. It's the actionable insights that you can distill from that data, and using software or using intelligence to identify that quicker is where building management or building managers have a burning need in our experience.
Okay, and in terms of Tony, I'll bring you in here. And this, in terms of doing that, how do you do that? How, like, as in, if I was that provider and I wanted to say, okay, Tony, help me here, what does that look like?
Yeah, I suppose someone rarely comes asking for a data analytics solution. They're looking for either energy savings, or they're looking for to extend the lifetime of their plant. They're looking for something very concrete like that. And then you can take various approaches then using data analytics and data harvesting and so on. An example I'd like to give you is around, say, a boiler system in a large commercial office, whereby you have a meter, a BMS system that's relatively old, maybe greater than 10 years, doesn't have, let's say, can't provide you with a backnet output, or like an open protocol to extract data easily. But there's a lot of complexity in the system. It's feeding air handling units, RADs. There's energy meters, but they're on a separate system altogether. So you have, as Paul mentioned, you have a BMS with a large volume of data available in it that can't be accessed. You have an energy metering system that's separate and slightly removed. And people don't know how to reduce the energy consumption in the building because they just don't have visibility on what's happening. So in that scenario, we can either go into the BMS and extract the data by remapping it. It's a slow and it's a bit of a heavy process. Or else another approach we can use is to drop in IoT sensors onto key pieces of equipment, say like a BMS plant or a boiler plant, the LPHW system, and using machine learning and data analytics to analyze the key piece of information like a flow and return temperature sensor. You can profile how that large piece of equipment is performing, when it's operating, what's driving it, and draw insight where there was no visibility beforehand. So you had all this equipment complexity, data that was locked away, and you can unlock it quite easily with a low-cost solution like an IoT sensor. And that's the type of, I suppose, R&D that we've been doing to leverage data where previously it was inaccessible.
Okay, but so yeah, absolutely. So and again, what I'm hearing there is that, you know, it's the pulling of the data out of buildings so that you can start doing with it. But I'm still struggling to see where this actual change is going to come from, because even when you pull that out, you know, who's the engineer that's looking at that? So you know, I did mechanical engineering years ago. I spent years commissioning power stations, so I knew how plant and equipment run. I was able to walk down, put my hand on a motor and go, vibrations that we're in trouble, need to do something about it. So we're now talking about taking that information up, but ultimately there was the building engineer, the mechanical engineer, the electrical engineer that said, yeah, you know, that panel, there's a problem there. Like, as in, anyone can do a thermographic study of it, but like, as in, a good engineer will say that's normal, that's not normal. Where does that knowledge come from to do something with this data? Because this is where I'm struggling with this, in that we can collect data and we can put it into dashboards and we can report it to investors, but you ultimately need engineering skill sets to actually then do something with that so that they can actually make decisions around that asset. Or am I missing the point here?
No,
Peter,
yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, it needs to be an output, a clear output, an actionable output. And Paul will have mentioned that before, that it needs to be tangible, that someone can act on it. But you then need someone on the other side to actually be able to receive that information and act upon it. Someone responsible, and they could be in-house or they could be a facility management company appointed. But yeah, you absolutely need someone that is able to take that information and work with it.
So I think I'll ask the question, is that knowledge in the industry, is that knowledge in the FMs and with client organizations anymore?
But I would think what the software would bring to the data set, Bernard, is that intelligence or that knowledge repository that you're referring to there. Those fault detection diagnostics rules that would run across the data will identify what you used to do by putting your hand on a motor. data is indicating that there is an issue with that motor, whether it's a vibration sensor or whatever it is. But I think what the challenge is, and I think maybe you're touching on it, is the bridging the gap between what's identified as an opportunity and what can be realized as a bankable saving for the client. So that's where I suppose the convergence between software and people is paramount. Otherwise, you just have another report in your inbox of 20 other things that you need to do. So it's I suppose it's figuring out how best to collaborate and engage with the technicians that are at the coalface, to tell them, to empower them what they need to do to address the issue that the software is after identifying, so that they can then, as I said, prevent the plant and equipment from running inefficiently.
Okay. If I could put it in there, Bernard, to you, in terms of delivery. So you've asked for what are tangible deliverables, and the guys are absolutely right. You know, good data analytics, a good interpretation of the data sets the framework for what are the opportunities and how do we get there. Out on the flip side, where I suppose where I inhabit in the IFM business, it tends to be on that interface point that Paul was talking about, which is if you like, the delivery of that, the translation of that opportunity into a tangible deliverable. So the kinds of technologies, which is what you asked for, the kinds of things we'd be looking for are, what is the driver from the client perspective? Is it carbon reduction? If it is carbon reduction, can we do demand reduction, which is a cost saving anyway? And can we also do alternatives? Those are the rational questions. Do we have an alternative? If it's electricity, is it fully renewable? Will that do a large decarbonisation step for me if I switch my procurement? If it was on the gas side or on the heating side, am I running on fuel oil? Do I have an opportunity to move on to LNG? Not a green technology, but it may achieve a reduction in emissions as a transition step to get you where you want to be. Government policy supports the deployment of heat pumps. There are grants available. So you need people who are familiar with the grant system to bring funding towards your projects. You also need to be familiar with the regulations, the building regulations, as to what direction is legislation pushing, if you like, the deployment of technology. So currently that's pushing in the direction of heat pumps to electrify heat. And within that space then, what are your engineering, going back to your point of, you know, you're an engineer, you want tangible things. What are your engineering choices that you can make? For example, with a heat pump, you can source the heat for it on the return line to your existing chillers. It'll improve the COP of your existing chillers, and you can use that waste heat and step it up through your own heat pump and put it back out into the LPHW side, unloading existing boilers. So there's a tangible, if you like, translation of an application of technology. If you want an example of a high-level project, we recently did one where we took out, as part of a life cycle, we took out 1.2 megs of cooling, replaced it with a cascade of heat pumps, used the waste from, used them to provide chilling, and the waste heat from those to do LPHW, and the de-superheat to do domestic hot water. The result is that the gas bill for that particular building is gone for about 7 months of the year. Those are tangible deliverables using existing technologies, using the data that the other participants on the panel, their companies are providing. It gives us the insights into, you know, what's possible, what's feasible, and what pays back, because ultimately it has to pay back.
So again, like, as in, is this a challenge that, you know, sustainability in FM actually needs to come with the capability in terms of software, which is a skill set in its own right, because, you know, that data harvesting, that data analytics, the intelligence that, say, Peter, Tony, and Paul, what you're bringing, needs to be combined with mechanical plant and equipment or electrical plant and equipment. That, you know, you have to have that, you know, HVAC system has been changed, the heat pump to a boiler, changing from one to the other. Now you're talking about M&E contractors. Does that sit, do they sit as good bedfellows together? And again, within the FM industry, where, you know, you have clients who are just confused and don't know where to go, and you have FM providers that are sort of saying, umbrella it under me because, you know, it's a commercial model I can deliver into you as a client. Is that a challenge? And do we need new entrants to the marketplace that combine both that M&E capability along with the software technology. And is that where, the next 3 to 5 years, you're going to see the bolters in the industry come from, that they actually have the M&E capability with the software to actually, land on top of that equipment to get the most out of it, both in terms of energy utilization, but also in terms of decarbonizing it and providing the opportunities for the continuous improvement as we go forward. Peter, again, have you had to partner up with any, or are you seeing that? Is that a challenge that's in the industry?
Well, with respect to partnering up on engineering, no, we haven't. I suppose I just wanted to come at something at a slightly different angle. My experience when we go into buildings is, so if you take, we're in the commercial office space, okay? Most landlords there don't really have proper oversight of what energy is consumed in all their buildings, because they'll typically only have the landlord electricity meter, and all the tenant meters will go to the account of the tenant. So, like, at the very basic level, a lot of property owners won't have proper oversight of what the total energy consumption in their building is. And that's my experience, and that's part of the problem we're trying to solve. I do believe at the moment, and the other participants have spoken about it, if there's a positive return of investment to be got by engineering challenges, those projects may go ahead in certain buildings. But what's missing is the high level oversight. And when people start getting the total energy footprint of a building and comparing them right across their portfolio and counting the cost of carbon, I believe that a lot more projects will come out of the woodwork, that they'll start identifying ones that may have marginal ROI, return of investment, but will become mandatory because the carbon footprint of that building is so poor. Building ratings are increasingly important. Plenty of tenants will not lease a building unless the energy rating in that building is reasonably good, because it'll go to their scope 3 emissions, and that's really important.
Okay, and I'm going to come back to the cost and the capital in a second.
Bernard, just can I just touch on one point, just in relation to the M&E people that you and the design, just in relation to that around. I'd like to give an example of a project we recently have worked on. It followed the exact same process as any other project, whereby you had your design consultants, your M&E, your BMS implementation team. So look, there was nothing different about how the project was envisaged and designed. The only, I suppose, addition that was added to it was to make sure that the BACnet, the BMS system was BACnet compatible, and the data could be accessed. It was accessible to the likes of ourselves as a data analyst. And we came into the latter end of the project, and what we were doing was validating that the intended design was actually achieved. We were looking at how the zones were performing, how the fan coil units were performing, how the air handling units were performing, and so on. And so, like, from an M&E and construction perspective, there was no difference except the systems were designed to give data, to be able to provide data to the likes of Paul Walsh in SIM or ZiggyTec and ourselves, that we could come in at a latter stage of the project and help bring better transparency to how well the building was functioning.
But should there be more of a focus on the earlier stage? Because again, if you're looking to verify and validate after, the horse is bolted. So do clients need to change and sort of say, actually, during that design scope, before I have my building fit out, I actually then need to be looking at my sustainability objectives for the buildings. And again, is that happening with new builds already, because we have the likes of the Grisby score and BREEAM and things like that? So, are we relatively well covered there? Is it more, again, the existing built infrastructure that now is struggling? And again, that, the challenge there is that if you want to make change, you're going to have to go and harvest the data from it, and then you're going to have to find someone that can do the mechanical, electrical, infrastructural changes that actually will decarbonize that building. So have we two different scenarios here we need to look at?
Yeah, I think SEI have a great stat around that, Bernard, where they say that 80% of the energy over the life cycle of a building can be saved at the design stage. And we often find that there's a bit of a dichotomy here in that the people who are tasked with building a building are not the people who are tasked with running it. And oftentimes they have this lovely term called value engineering. So they basically take out anything that's sustainability related just to get the building in under capital and then hand it over to an operational team who have been handed a poison chalice, really, or something that's very, very hard to optimize, or it hasn't got the open protocol that Tony mentioned there to allow companies to do the analytics on it to help them optimize it. So I think what's happening is there's definitely a shift in the last couple of years, I think, around ensuring that sustainability is baked in at URS stage when a building is specified. And I think Peter mentioned it there around the operational efficiency metrics that are being enforced that through BREEAM or through lead in operation as opposed to lead at design. They're becoming transformational in the sector, really, because they're holding the building owners accountable to how well the building is being run, not how well it had been designed. And that then is a very tangible metric for them to ensure that they're keeping it up to date and keeping it optimized, and then able to attract a premium for the tenant in terms of the rates they charge, because it's now a sustainable building. So I in the last couple of years, I've seen that connection being made between the design and the operational team. But up to that, there were two different teams.
I think the biggest challenge is that, any construction project, there's so much pressure under time and financial constraints that the expectation to do much extra within that window, it's really, really difficult to hope for anything. If they were looking at data as the data being a really valuable source for them for the future operation of the building, and if they made sure that data was accessible and was there was interconnection, there wasn't silos, that would at least set you up to run the building more efficiently. But to cut your nose off to save some time or money during the construction project, you'll pay for it over the entire lifetime of the building.
Exactly.
So how do we address that? Go ahead, Paul.
You see it happening all the time. And I mean, I'll pick very simple examples. New build office block, and you'd like to put in VSDs on the fans, or you'd like to put in a fan wall so as to be able to modulate. And somewhere along the line, it morphs into a belt-driven fixed-speed fan, and we've saved ourselves, €5,000 or something in the exercise. And I know exactly what the guys are talking about. And Paul's absolutely on the money insofar as you spend the project team deliver to a budget and a time scale and value engineer it. And the operations team, through their OPEX, now spend the next 20 years trying to bring that building back to where it should have been on day one. And have to go fighting for a second round of capital, which is the bizarre part of it. And I suppose capital keeps coming back in, and access, enabling capital is a great step forward if you can bring it to the party a lot of times. But certainly, if we look at a building as, in its simplest terms, it's a box. The performance of the box is a function of our building regulations and how well it was put together. All of the services that get put in the box are engineering services. And all we're discussing at project stage is what degree of complexity are we willing to pay for on those systems as they're installed.
I totally agree with you, Paul. I totally agree with you. So what I'm seeing is, in office spaces, the energy costs is a complete second order cost. It's not that important. Obviously, if you go into industry, it is important. In office space, it's a complete secondary cost. It does have the focus. I know from my experience in dealing with people that building owners are only just now starting to get on top with, well, what's the energy footprint of this thing? I think, and I really believe, because you mentioned, Bernard, greenwashing there a while ago, I really believe that the disclosure requirements is going to bring a tsunami of change next year. I think it's going to be massive, because all of a sudden they're saying, well, I actually have to put some type of greenhouse gas stamp on this. And the minute you start, and as my tenants and customers start looking for it, it is going to drive huge change, and they're possibly and probably going to have to invest, even though the ROIs on it don't look terribly nice. But it becomes a mandatory, compulsory thing to get it a crop building up the scale.
Yeah. So again, like as in, I would agree with you. I think, you know, I think this is coming. I think it's been sort of, you know, turned a blind eye to. I think it was starting before COVID. COVID in the last 18 months has allowed everyone to hide from the reality of it. And as we're coming out, hopefully, fingers crossed, we're starting to come out of COVID. I know it's still a challenge. I know it'll continue to be a challenge, but I do think sustainability is back up there now. And I do think you are going to get this, you know, landslide coming at us in terms of demand. I'm still not sure how we're going to meet that demand, and I still think that there will be people that will hide, as you said, Paul, around, you know, take the costs out during the design stage, you know, value engineer the solution. I was involved in 2 projects in the last year, again, where sustainability initiatives were taken out at BAFO or at final stage negotiations because of the cost element. And what we were saying, yeah, it might cost a little bit more now, but it won't over time. People were still going, I have a budget, has to hit the budget figure. So getting into the cost, this is one of the challenges we have, again, is any change costs. So if we're bringing technology to the game, whether it's at the start of a project or in retrofitting or upgrading or continuous improvement, what are the ways of getting around this? How do we get that? Peter, you've mentioned a couple of times the return on investment. If a financial person's looking at it and your terms are 18 months has to show ROI, that's the company policy. Half of these projects will never get across that threshold. So what are the solutions? So we know that's the problem. What's the solution? What do we need to bring in? What needs to happen in the industry to actually facilitate that hurdle be jumped? Is that just, you know, are we looking for government? Are we looking for someone to give us money to do it? Or what are the other potential solutions that are there?
Well, I'll answer that, Bernard. Like, I go back to what I said before. I really strongly believe that as tenants start saying, well, my corporate head office has asked me for a greenhouse gas disclosure reporting. As they start asking building owners to provide them with that information, it's going to bring a lot more transparency to it. And building owners are going to look at this and saying, well, actually, to get a proper class tenant, I'm going to have to invest in the infrastructure of the building. Okay. You know?
So again,
is that to that as well?
Yeah.
Sorry, go on, Bernard. I suppose just when you look at ROI on from an energy perspective alone, I think it's too simplistic.
Yeah.
Looking ahead to carbon, I suppose the carbon penalties, reliability of supply, and I suppose the opportunity that exists around that will come down the line around demand response. We have a lot more renewables that need to come onto the Irish grid, and having buildings that can respond to fluctuations in generation and reap the financial reward of that will be a great carrot to add to the stick that is the carbon penalties. I think those type of elements.
Again, like as in, but you know, I'd be a firm believer we should be introducing microgrids to this country and should have for the last 10 years. I was in California just before lockdown for some meetings, and again there was people putting solar grids on top of their houses everywhere because they could sell it directly in. It was there already. The technology is available for us to do that. But you know, we've got a green party that's in government that is saying that it's driving this, but we still don't have the legislative authority to actually allow, never mind, you know, offshore wind generation, but microgrids. Like, we're a long way from being there. So again, does the industry need to put pressure on government to actually start legislating for this? Or, you know, and again, I'm conscious, I said this on the last session, you know, we can say these are the right things to do, but, you know, the carbon impact, like the climate impact is happening now. You know, we've had mild weather for the last month. Great, fine here, but you know, what happens when we get to the middle of winter and it's -20 in Ireland, and when it gets to summer and it's 30, and you know, like I say, that's happening now. So does this pressure need to come quicker for that sort of legislative change so that we can start implementing it?
from an energy supply perspective, you know, we're already getting flagged that we're at risk this winter. But the risk is far greater. We're at the end of a pipeline coming from Russia, but that pipeline can affect the entire European Union. So, you know, I think European-wide, energy supply, energy security is really a high agenda, and they're going to funnel change through carbon penalties and pressure in that regard to put pressure on the governments and to that trickle down, so that we do adopt things like demand response and I suppose you know, better technology solutions in our buildings.
Yeah.
So I think from an energy supply perspective, there's going to be pressure to make changes.
Paul Farrell, like as in you're doing, you know, power supply agreements, like as in at a corporate level. Are you seeing demand supply coming into, and especially I suppose I look again probably at the bigger users of energy, say Paul Walsh and Paul Farrell, where you're into, you know, manufacturing capability and that level of energy, where we're trying to decarbonize that, but we're also trying to say, well, you know, if they've got generators there, can we switch on demand supply into the grid? Are you seeing that, and is it different between Ireland and into Europe?
Sure. Just before I answer that, just to touch on the smaller buildings, it is possible to do it. We just completed a project, the kind of space that Peter would be in, which would be a large set of apartments with a complete relighting on LED, all completely financed through a combination of SEAI and finance, low-cost finance that we brought to that party, and the job gets done. The building is more efficient. So it is actually possible in the smaller space. So the trick is to have a low-cost finance partner. To answer your direct question then on the bigger players, certainly on the bigger players through PPAs, which are very flexible, because it's possible now to sculpt power purchase agreements almost completely to the needs of the client. What are their corporate reporting arrangements? What degree of transparency do they need in terms of their reporting? Do they need the guarantee of origin bundled or not? Do they need an assignable asset to be connected to that power purchase agreement? All of these things can be done. And then moving out one step from the power purchase agreement, you can have a look at, you know, other opportunities now for the same developer, again, to keep it off balance sheet. Can we now bolt in PV? So could we do a PV array for your site? Can we build the cost of that into the PPA so that effectively the utility cost now is going to pay down the investment cost? Move it out a step again, battery technology, which is going to help us provide the DS3 services and help with the stability of the grid with regards to demand management and responding to, you know, frequency change. Again, those services can be co-located. Again, you don't have to have the capital investment in that. Primarily, it's going to be the PPA owner is interested in providing those. Again, it can be bolted into your PPA. Those batteries can be fed back through their own meter back towards your site or to critical services. And you can structure them to be running at the same rate as PPAs, but now you're giving a bigger penetration of renewables overall onto the grid because of your ability to store. So all of these things are doable within the marketplace, and not all of them require the client's capital to be done, because sometimes there's actually an income to be got off these things by sharing the service income for the DS3 services for the co-location on site.
Okay, and again, Paul Walsh, are you seeing this, and how is that, Barry? Going back to the question, so you know, how do you get these projects across the line in terms of if there's an ROI driving in the commercial and that cost challenge that's there, whether we think it's a high barrier or low barriers there, how do we get across it?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, and it's something we face, I suppose, every day of the week around, you know, the cost of deployment. But I suppose what we bring to clients is an OPEX solution. So in theory, there's no return on investment because there's no investment made. But what we say to clients is, look, if your plant and equipment is running inefficiently, and there's a high chance it is, then the bucket is already leaking, you know, in terms of your energy bill is already contained a high percentage waste or inefficiencies. And our argument to them, like, is the cheapest kilowatt hour, the greenest kilowatt hour is the one you don't use. So the demand side reduction initiatives that we bring, or that data analytics brings to the clients, helps them become sustainable, also more competitive because it reduces their cost base. And then in terms of the fees or the cost that we charge, that tends to be a fraction of what the clients save. So we call it a cash flow positive time frame rather than a return on investment. And again, we have a track record in that high-tech manufacturing sector, that we have plenty of referenceable case studies that we can share with clients that articulates that value proposition, Bernard. So it kind of takes that, it de-risks it for them, if you like, because the as I said, the angle we go in with is the bucket is already leaking.
Okay, so the other side is, I suppose, the conundrum within the industry, and we talked. I think Paul, you mentioned this earlier on about that cost conundrum. FM service providers and the FM. So you've got client organizations at the moment, and normally why they outsource within the FM industry is to take costs down. It's the biggest driver in the industry. So all the academic papers say, why do people outsource? It's to reduce costs. So that's pushing a certain amount of this responsibility to the FM companies. So again, as in, if you want to go to a client organization, quite often now you have to go through the FM company. So some of the FM companies, Paul, you're here today, you're delivering this, and so is Mighty, so is CBRE. They all have their own offering around this to a certain extent. One of the things I see is again, the innovation, the technology, the R&D development isn't necessarily a bedfellow that sits well with FM, that are focused primarily on delivering an integrated overall solution. So they've got their catering, their hard services, their soft services, their cleaning, and they're making sure to manage service. Are you seeing that as a challenge in terms of trying to bring this level of technology? And again, we're talking about the technology that will enable sustainability in FM. Is this a problem? As in the commercial model that exists, is this a problem for us?
It is. Because on the one hand, as I would see it, the conundrum, as you rightly described it, is that there's a cost to expertise and knowledge. There's a cost to innovation. If we're chasing the lowest cost model on the renewal of our IFM contract, and we're trying to strip cost out of it, then the casualties in that exercise are going to be expertise, are going to be innovation. And it's a race to the bottom. And as a company, Apleona have decided not to get involved in that race. So from a philosophical perspective, we're still an engineering company. We still self-deliver. More than 80% of all the services that come out of Apleona come from Apleona. They're not subcontracted out. We maintain, if you like, the competence, the training, the innovation, and we try to upsell that to our corporate clients, especially. Not always successfully. Frequently, we'd lose a bid because the cost model is king. But I suppose it's a matter of where do you want to position yourself within the spectrum of service providers? Do you want to be a coordinator who's managing disparate subcontracted services over which you've a challenge in terms of quality and expertise and delivery? Or do you want to take on the cost of developing that in-house capability and trying to sell that proposition to your prospective clients? That's where we sit.
It is, but again, I go back to the industry. There's a large part of the industry is, it falls into that FM. So if we want to bring sustainability, we're going to have to go this route. So, from service providers like Peter, yourselves, and I know you're dealing a lot with people directly, but have you had the experience of trying to go through the FMs organizations, and does that work or doesn't it work? Because again, all of those outsourced contracts are on 3 to 5 year cycles in terms of, from bid, mobilization. You get up and run the first year, you lose your shirt year 1, you try and recover it year 2 and year 3, you're back into your next bid, and the client is potentially in a procurement cycle where they're going to change again. So investment comes very thin on the ground, and bringing additional organizations that would bring software enhancement and technology, which would need an ROI, but you need time to get the ROI out the other side. If you make it very short, it becomes very difficult. Even if you're trying to do this as a value proposition, even if you're trying to do it as a service solution, you still need time to recover your investment. So are you seeing that, Peter?
I think that does exist in the industry, Bernard. But some of the smarter players, what I'm saying is, they realise that they have to invest. They realise that this short term, this market where office space in Dublin in particular, but right through Ireland, was like gold dust, really hard to get, and you could lease it out. That's not the way it's going to be going forward. It's going to be a lot more competitive, and how your building is run will be important is increasingly important to an awful lot of prospective tenants. And the lease cycles are getting shorter, and obviously, we haven't really mentioned COVID-19 too much, but that could have a dramatic impact on the demand for office space. You have to assume it's going to ameliorate, going to reduce to some extent the need for office space. You have to assume that, particularly in the Greater Dublin region. All of that's going to drive people to be more competitive in how they manage their buildings.
Yeah, and as the end users become more and more aware of the transparency and opportunities for sustainability that come from this type of technology, I suppose the good facility management operators will see that as an opportunity as opposed to a threat, and try and bring it into their organization as best as possible.
But will they bring it in through their? Will they bring it into their own offering, or are they going to go to the marketplace and use subject matter experts? So again, if I was a FM provider and I have lifts, I'm going to bring a lift specialist in with me because it's not my skill set. A lot of the FM players, what I'm seeing is that they're dabbling in it themselves. Is that, from your point of view, the right or wrong way to go? Do they have, we've 3 Irish companies here that are all doing R&D in this space. I don't know of any FM company in Ireland that's doing R&D in this level. So should they be partnering or bringing on this journey, or should clients, if you were going to them, say the route to sustainability isn't through FM, the route is actually go direct?
Well, in our experience, Bernard, any FM we see on site, they really do want to do a good job, and they do want to bring sustainability. They're often hampered by, 2 technicians being on site and, in a constant reactive mode and struggling to keep the lights on, the kind of methodology. And I suppose Paul touched on it earlier, is around that pricing model being cut so tight that the FM companies can't afford to have any more bodies on site. And they certainly don't have the bandwidth to take on any kind of, have any type of HVAC experts on site or any type of data analysts on site that could provide insights for those 2 technicians that are running around in that constant firefighting mode. So I think there are certain FM companies that are trying to develop this type of a solution themselves, and a few of them have their own offerings on it. But I think it's almost a prerequisite now for a good FM company that Tony mentioned there, that most of the FM companies we deal with, and Apleona being a classic case in point, are aware that they have to bring this to their clients, and it is something that it will unlock sustainability for them and for their technicians.
Okay. So guys, we're coming up on the hour now. So I just want to go around to you, and I suppose you're in the industry. We've talked about the data analytics, the importance of it, the drive to, reduce your energy usage is I think, Paul, Walsh, you mentioned the greenest kilowatt is the one that isn't even ever used. So we've looked at that, and we've looked at the costs and the challenges going into the industry. What's your sense, and just a word, where will sustainability go in FM in the next year or 2? Is it going to be something that becomes more important and actually gets implemented, or is it still going to be an uphill struggle? Because I would say it's been an uphill struggle to now. Will it become mainstream? Will it become something that actually you're pushing doors open and projects are happening and we're starting to decarbonize the built environment? Peter?
I genuinely believe it is, and for the reasons that when the finance director of these companies has to sign his annual accounts and put in his carbon disclosure requirements, that's going to drive change, and it's going to drive change a lot faster than we would have thought.
Very good. Tony?
Yeah, I suppose just to mirror what Peter was saying, I genuinely do believe that that it will, simply because the type of value that we can expose now, I really believe that people can understand that and see it and can implement it, and it's just too powerful not to miss out on. So I do believe it's the future is around implementing sustainability for buildings.
Paul Farrell?
Yeah, I kind of echo the sentiments of the other panelists. I think there will be a drive on for it. I think one of the big drivers currently is going to be the sheer exorbitant cost of energy. That's going to focus people's minds, if only because their budgets are being blown apart. But I also worry that we won't have the capacity to deliver it as a nation. We don't have enough apprentices. We don't have enough qualified people. We have a very active sponsorship program in our company for graduate engineers to try and bring them on. But I really do fear that the bandwidth won't be there for Ireland Inc. when this push comes on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Paul Walsh?
Yeah, look, I think the point is kind of made already, but what I see a lot happening is the CSO, the Chief Sustainability Officer, now is becoming more powerful in an organization, and he or she can typically mandate that these type of initiatives are executed on across the business. Yeah. And I think a lot of the times in the energy reduction space, we talk about these famous low-hanging fruit, right? That's a term a lot of us are sick of hearing, but people talk about changing their lights or putting in, VSDs or replacing chillers. Yeah. And I think what data analytics can bring to the party is an opportunity for the sustainability journey to start very cost effectively, and essentially to get the first rung on the ladder, the first cab off the rank. Yeah. And then start building a coalition of the willing internally to say, listen, this is what we got by doing step A. There's 6 steps to get to carbon neutrality or whatever the organization's goal is. But I definitely feel that starting with a cost efficient and sustainable initiative is the way to go.
Yeah. So guys, thanks a million for joining me today. I think that's been a very robust conversation. And again, for me, sustainability has to be part of what we do going forward in the industry. And it's the likes of yourselves that can enable that, as in no organization is going to be able to go on this journey alone. And it's really important that we have, industry leaders with expertise. And going back to your point, Paul Farrell, that expertise, we can bring the first level in terms of that data and the analytics. We also then need people that can bring it on the next journey and actually make sure it's implemented. And that has to go through organizations and through FM teams. So hope everyone's enjoyed today. I certainly did. Yeah. I certainly learned a lot in that. So thanks a million. And we'll see you in January for our 3rd in the series in sustainability, where we're going to look at leadership. Because that's the next challenge. We've talked about where FM sits or sustainability sits with FM. We've talked about the technology that's there that can actually help us go on that journey. But the last cog of that wheel for me is leadership. And if there isn't leadership, this will end up floundering on the rocks. So we're really looking forward to a really strong panel of speakers. We're meeting at the end of January, and we'll look at how leadership is going to bring us on this journey. Everyone, thanks a million. And we're going to hop into our Q&A room. So join us in the Q&A room. And if not, we'll see you out there, and have a good Christmas.
Cheers.
Thanks, Farr.
Thanks, Ian.
Hi, everyone. Thanks a million. And I hope you've enjoyed that session. I think a really, really robust conversation around the technology that's there. And I suppose for me, the big takeaway from the discussion was that there's going to be a huge push in the next months and years around sustainability, and the technology is there. The providers like the panelists we had today are available, and they're already working on it. It's really about how we drive that change now, and how we make sure that it's well supported, the finances and the costing models are right, and I suppose our challenge then is, do we have the skill set and the capability of people? So we're going to open up now for Q&A. I know Jean had some questions there. Panelists are joining me here, so we've got Peter, Tony, and Paul. Paul Farrell, unfortunately, is unavailable today, so he's not going to be able to join us. But Peter, Paul, and Tony, thanks a million. So again, Farrell, great. Paul, you made it. So it's great to have you back again. Again, we recorded this a little bit in advance because modern day technology, don't want to go live with a webinar if internet goes dodgy. So I suppose we've had a bit of time to digest it. Again, in reflection now, is there anything else that you're seeing? Is there anything, I suppose, as a takeaway from our conversation that you'd like to add to? Paul, I'll jump to you. You were at the RDS last week. Was there anything exciting happening there that you were going, God, that's new, that's exciting?
Yeah, look, I suppose the key takeaway for me was, and on reflection, I think what the key message for everyone in attending is that, like, the tools and the technologies are there, right? What we're suggesting is, not groundbreaking in terms of starting the journey around sustainability, and there are proven case studies and proven technologies out there to start companies on their sustainability journey. And I suppose the typical hurdles that companies have to face around capex or people intensive programs, or sometimes planning permission if they were looking at putting up on-site generation, they're no longer there, and I think that's certainly helping the conversation move faster.
Yeah,
that was my key takeaway. Didn't see much of it in the RDS, mind you. It was more kind of a manufacturing, robotics and automation and those type of technologies there.
Very good. Again, Tony, Peter, or Paul Farrell, in reflection from our conversation, anything else you'd like to add?
No, I think we fairly comprehensively covered the topic on the day. I'm looking forward to taking some questions, maybe from people with their, I suppose, coming from their specific angle.
Okay, so we'll jump across then to questions. So Jean, I'm not sure if you're still there. You made a comment around Tony and a comment that smart building catch-all isn't helpful, and I certainly agree with this. So again, you want to know if there's insight, what do you derive and what actions you can perform. So again, I think we've covered quite a lot of it. Like, as pulling data and that data harvesting is crucial, but it's really taking it to the next level. It's really doing something with it. It's the analytics, it's the machine learning that Paul talked about, and Tony, that we can now take that information out and we can now start doing something with it. So I'm not sure, Jean, if you want any other questions specifically around that. There's another one there. Is there any kind of shift from building fabric grants to renewables with regard to legacy assets? Martin raised that. So again, any of the panelists want to come in on that first, in terms of the shift away from building fabric grants to renewables? Is that something you're seeing is probably more focused on the domestic, and is it something for commercial buildings we need to be looking at?
Certainly, in our experience in looking at those kind of projects, they have a high level of complexity, very high cost, and coming back to the data, frequently there's very weak data in the background to base the investment decision on. The metering on sites can be quite poor, and if you're trying to, we'd say, get a reasonable or credible model built as to what savings the upgrade will generate against the capital investment that's going to be required. If you took a typical, say, office building as an example, you've got scaffolding, you've got high complexity, road closures, the whole lot. It's all adding cost. And how do you pay that down out of the project? And that's where we've seen quite a few of them just go into the sand.
Yeah. And again, is there any way around that? So again, you know, like I say, and if we look at the building fabric challenge, that's one. It's around, I suppose, what you have and making it more efficient. As against the renewables, is changing what you're currently doing, changing your mechanical, electrical plant and equipment. That's a lot more complex. It's a lot harder because you've a live plant and equipment. You've got already, you know, bums and seat manufacturing lines in process. You know, servers and data is already running. To take down power, to change and take down heating systems when people are in buildings. That whole transitional project alone is difficult. Never mind the risk of going from an older system to a new system, and will the controls work? Will the balancing be right? Is that something that, again, I suppose, how do we get over that hurdle? Because ultimately, if we want to change from our existing environmental friendly systems, and I was talking to someone about an air conditioning retrograde, and they're on 410A, they're on 407C still. They even had one system still on R22. But again, the challenge to get rid of those systems and to bring in new systems, there's a real challenge around that in terms of just the engineering challenge. Is there any way of dealing with that or circumventing it, or what are the clever solutions we can bring to the marketplace?
I think on some of the it depends on the scale. Every project is unique. I don't need to say that really. Frequently, what we would try and do to minimize disruption and to keep as much of a building live as possible would be to see how much of it can we package into a space. You know, do you want one centralized distribution system? If you have centralized distribution, be it for hot or cold water through a building, for say HVAC purposes, and the pipework is still in good shape, essentially it's a straightforward, relatively straightforward engineering task to retire out boilers or, you know, chillers and change out heat pumps and that. They're the kinds of things that can be done over holiday periods, tend not to be too intrusive. BMS upgrades can be done in parallel to a lot of processes which are already running, even if you want to upgrade the BMS and migrate it onto a cloud-based system. So those are all doable within live environments. The ones that as I say, the big exterior upgrades, you know, exterior, we'd say insulation, change out all the windows in a multi-story building. Those are the ones which are really intrusive and high cost. And I don't know, maybe there's a policy area there that needs to be looked at. How do we support that? You know, do we establish a national green bank with low cost finance for long-term payback projects? Because, you know, if we're all honest with each other, we can change out the technologies to a more efficient technology inside the building. But if the bucket, as I think it was Paul said it, if there's still the hole in the bucket, you're just more efficiently creating it to lose it. Ultimately, you have to address the envelope as well. Currently, the cost of that is a barrier. So I suppose, you know, we have to look at what are the solutions that can be brought either from green funds with private equity towards it at low cost, or is there a case to be made through SEAI or some government body for a state-sponsored scheme for low-cost capital to encourage that movement?
Very good. Very good. Martin, so I hope that's answered that question in relation to yours. There's another question in there. Is the OPEX model for delivering on sustainable goals well defined and clear for building owners and investors? Michael White. Peter, do you want to come in terms of that OPEX model? I know we talked in the thing about, you know, that return on investment is always a question, and we now have CFOs involved in this decision making. So, and one of the questions, one of the things that came up in reflection is that balance between CapEx and OPEX. Can we move the conversation away from CapEx and move it to OPEX so that actually you don't have that barrier of justifying a CapEx?
So that's an interesting question, because, like, following on and Paul was saying there was that if we look at all these projects, CapEx expensive, and we're trying to get a return on investment based on current energy prices, that's always going to be difficult. Notwithstanding that energy prices have rocketed up recently, it's always going to be difficult. However, if we start looking at it from a perspective of a return on investment on your carbon footprint, and where companies have hard targets to reach lower carbon footprint, all of a sudden those CapEx hurdles become a lot easier to cross. And that's the direction we're going. We're moving very fast from a world where in the past, the world up to now was all around making lofty statements about being carbon neutral in 2050 to we need to get 55% reduction in our carbon emissions by 2030, and we need to have yearly targets about how we're going to get there. And it's not just an ROI on a simple capital investment. It's we have to get there. We have to get there, and it's going to cost money. So it's just a different lens. If you look at it through the lens of your carbon footprint, and there is real motivation to drive down the carbon footprint through the circular economy, I think it will change my investment.
Okay, very good. So again, Michael, I hope that answers the question. And again, I do think, you know, investors now are far more aware of this because of the reporting obligations, because the level of media coverage now around sustainability. So they're asking those questions an awful lot more of the building owners, of the FM organizations, of the landlords, of how that's delivered. So I think sustainability is now becoming a conversation at that investor level and the financial areas. And that's driving the conversation. Well, what are we doing about it? To Peter's point, that's opening doors. That's taking down some of the barriers that, you know, it's easier to get that, you know, discussion across and say, actually, we do need to spend money here now if we want to hit our targets, because you have to report this at the end of the year. So another question in there from Nathan Barber. Interesting here, any advice or comments from the panel who've achieved or undertaken ISO 50001, the energy management system in any buildings? So again, anyone particularly been involved in ISO 50001? Paul, jump in there.
Yeah. So that's part of what I did in a previous life, Bernard. So what I found with 50001, I suppose it's a very good vehicle to start the energy management program on any large complex site. And I suppose it does a very good job of baselining where you currently are and identifying opportunities for improvement as to what can be done to reduce your energy demand side reduction over time. And the latest version of the standard, the 2018 version, I think it is, speaks about trying to loop in the senior leadership team on site and making them more accountable for the realization of the energy initiatives, as opposed to Peter's point there, paying them lip service. So I think it's a really, really good standard. It is quite a lot of heavy lifting to get it up and going. It can be quite bureaucratic. Especially if the level of metering on the site is not good, or the level of historical data, you end up going back through energy bills, and that can be a bit of a heavy lift. But once it's up and going, it's a bit like a wheel that once it gets a bit of momentum going, it can start to deliver some changes, and then that fuels additional initiatives across the site. So I highly recommend it. I think it's a great standard, and it does begin to it is beginning to get some teeth. So when the sites are audited, if the auditor doesn't see incremental change year on year, then you won't get recertified.
Yeah,
that's an interesting point you raise, Paul. Actually, because like yourself, we maintain ISO 50001 compliance for a number of our clients on multiple sites, and exactly as Paul's described it, it's quite a heavy lift. So in terms of the resources that you're willing to put into it is the first question. So is it appropriate to the size and complexity of your operation is the first question. It's on a 3-year auditing cycle to recertification. And then you've got the statutory SI 426 audit, which is on a 4-year cycle. And going back to your point there, Paul, on the 2018 standard, making it just a little bit tougher and driving it in the right direction. I suppose the temptation and the risk now for ISO 50001 would be that some customers might consider jumping to SI 426 and extend their audit. Like those who are doing it for a particular reason, most who have 50001 are doing it for the right reasons, to drive efficiency into their organizations. But if those who may have undertaken it in the past for to put the badge on the door, if they exist, then SI 426 is an easier route to compliance. So I think the 2018 standard ups the game. We actually have some upcoming audits this year or in 2022 for various sites, and we've done the transitions. So there is a noticeable step change in the standard. But again, smaller developers with a couple of office blocks around Dublin, you know, perhaps ISO 50001 is too complex and too labour intensive for them. And SI 426 compliance is maybe the route that best suits them.
Yeah, that's very good, Paul. And again, I you know, in my own role with Berka Solutions, I've been involved in 2 recently that were looking at ISO 50001, and actually both of them didn't go ahead, and for various reasons. One, I think that they probably didn't see the benefit as a big enough benefit for the amount of effort that was required to get it. And the second one's around leadership. I suppose the newer ISO really puts an ownership and a responsibility on the leadership. So historically, where, you know, the energy management system was, you give to the utilities department, sure, they'll take care of it. Stick a few energy projects in every year and give us a report. We'll tick that box. The ISO standard is no longer around that. Now it has to go up, and it has to be at a senior leadership table, which means that the FM and the utilities and the engineering department have to be at that level in the organizations. And I was with a corporate in the more, I suppose, corporate finance world, and working with those. And the people at the senior leadership table didn't have that technical skill set, and therefore weren't comfortable to put their name at the end of it and say that they're taking ownership. And it stopped at that point. So while there was a drive to bring it in for the right reason, there was no one willing to really take that lump and put it on their shoulder and say, I'll take that from a leadership position. So I still think that's a challenge. And the other one, again, size of organization, I agree. I think smaller organizations sometimes feel it would be good when we go to a bid, when it's something that we proves among peers that we're at a level. You know, sometimes if you're not that big, you're better off using your resources in other ways rather than trying to get that, because it becomes a burden in terms of the maintenance of it. So hopefully that's okay, Nathan. So the next one there, whilst designed for operations is an obvious underutilization sustainability area due to cost cutting, should the calibration and preventive maintenance not catch most of that anyway? So I suppose, again, I don't know if one of you wants to come in, Paul, I suppose in terms of calibration, preventive maintenance, should that be capturing a lot of this underutilization of the technical assets? So, you know, should your PM program and your calibration program not eliminate a lot of this and I suppose get rid of the underutilization of assets in the first place if you're managing your asset care program correctly?
I think there are 2 different points here, in that the design for operation really is around specifying the right type of plant and equipment for the building, and to make sure it's correctly sized and make sure it's running sustainably. Maybe the calibration and preventive maintenance is almost a separate body of work, or a separate operational type task that needs to be carried out. But what I would say is, no matter how good the calibration and preventive maintenance regime is, if the plant and equipment is not designed for sustainability, then it's, you know, it's like trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear. You know, you're never going to be able to manage it correctly because it's been poorly designed from day one. So I think the FM team are often handed a poison chalice, you know, to say, listen, we need you to run this building correctly. And oftentimes it can't be run correctly because it's not designed correctly. Back to, you know, previous points.
Yeah. And again, I think from my own experience, again, is seeing that quite a lot of the time, you know, there isn't an asset care strategy in a lot of organizations. You get to maybe the multinationals who have I suppose the resources in place and the level of complexity in their utilities that they can justify headcount that is based around reliability engineering, and they have that dedicated resource to be able to put an asset care program in place. A lot of companies don't. So again, a lot of them are doing scheduled planned preventive maintenance that is about compliance. It's about just, you know, making sure that we stay compliant and dealing with breakdowns. And that doesn't mean that you're necessarily sitting back and going, what's the value opportunity in re-engineering this from a sustainability perspective or from an energy perspective? So again, I think a lot of organizations struggle to go that step beyond the compliance requirement of a maintenance program into the value proposition that a maintenance program can bring in terms of asset care, in terms of making sure that you're utilizing that asset to the best of its effect with the least impact. And again, that's we talked about it ourselves in terms of, you know, making decisions around fixed speed versus VSD versus soft start, and how you can make those decisions over a longer term because there's a sustainability and an energy benefit from doing it. And again, if the 2 engineers in the building, as Paul Welsh indicated, if they run around just to keep the fans up and running, they're not going to have the time and the headspace to go on, well, what's the innovation, what's the value, what's the technology, where's the IoT I could put onto that, land onto OPNBuildings platform, so it runs some analytics and it starts telling me that actually those fans are coming on at night time when I didn't realize they were coming on, and it's not energy efficient. So again, Aaron, hopefully that answers your question there.
Just on that, I suppose you can maintain the status quo or the baseline, I think, with preventative maintenance and calibration, but it's very difficult to drive new levels of efficiency and optimization with carrying out maintenance that's designed to ensure operational functionality as opposed to optimized operation to meet needs. So it is a new approach that's required.
And just one of the other barriers, Bernard, is I suppose an institutional barrier, which is the orthodoxy of the organization itself. And just an example of it would be, say, in pharma, many years back in a former life, leading a project team to introduce air change reduction rates in a GMP environment. And you've got the orthodoxy of design. So I mean, I remember from that time looking across a spectrum of companies, and for ISO class 8, the number of air changes per hour ranged from 40 down to 12, depending on which company specified the design for the room. Nothing wasn't based on test results, was based on a company standard. And again, the inherited wisdom or standards coming with those organizations in terms of being able to put the challenge forward of, we're not using those areas on weekends and we're going to drop them down to 6 or to 4, and to prove out the quality, there's no quality impact. But to even get the buy-in to ask that question, to be willing to step forward and conduct that experiment was quite challenging. So there's a human element in all of this in driving change as well. It's not just the data, it's the willingness to have a look.
Yeah. And again, I think one of the things, if you look at Cotter and his 8 steps to change management, the first is you need that burning platform. And I think, that's probably there at the moment. It's become apparent. It's got the legislation drive. It's the investors. There's a groundswell of emotions around sustainability. So I think that burning platform's there now that allows people to start. And the second is getting that collaboration of people to go on the journey with you, and that's what you're saying. Like, again, I was involved in a large pharma company for a long time, and again, it's trying at times to get the right people to sort of say, I need you to go with me, and they're going, no, where we are, we'll stay, and this is the island, and everyone can go around that group of people working collectively and moving the same direction. Then you'll build no momentum, and change needs momentum. You have to start, and you have to have the stakeholders on board. So any other questions there from any of our audience? Okay, so if we don't have any other questions, guys, I just want to say thank you again to my 4 speakers, Peter Murphy from ZiggyTec, Tony O'Keefe from OPNBuildings, Paul Farrell from Apleona, and Paul Walsh from CIM. I really enjoyed our session. Again, going back to the point, I think the technology's there. I think, okay, hang on, we have another question coming in there. Would overspec be seen in the light of design issues also, and is that an issue that could crop up more often in new buildings due to sustainability? So Aaron, so yeah, again, in terms of Peter or Paul, do you want to jump in this? Again, we're talking about the importance of getting the spec right going forward. Is over specification going to be a challenge going forward?
I think it's certainly been a feature of historical design. Why have one if you can have 2? Kind of philosophy being applied. And you see it in so many places, be it boilers which are oversized and running way down their efficiency curve, or chillers which have been oversized for capacity, and they're actually cycling too short, and sometimes even time themselves out because of that short cycling. They go into safe operation mode. So, and again, I think there is a task of work in terms of perhaps upskilling our design houses to a degree at the design stage. You know, we're working off data, we're working off tables, and I think, you know, in the best engineering tradition, we all think a bit more might just help. But I think we do need, if you like, the study of renewables and that whole understanding to move down into the mechanical design houses. I think we'll start to get better outcomes if we do, just in terms of initial designs, and then to have some kind of review process where we are putting it under the spotlight before we ever get to the talking about money for it. You know, are we designing for efficiency from day one?
And SEI run a good Exceed program, Bernard. That's quite useful. It spends a bit of time. It's excellence in energy efficiency and design, and it basically does that type of upfront evaluation using empirical data if it's available to ensure plant and equipment is correctly sized. And that's a really good program. I was involved in that before.
And I think the challenge here is this too. One, you get the over design in people, so that needs to be right. But two, then the challenge is that people then value engineer the solution again to try and take costs out of it before it does. And that's where they take the designs as over designed and maybe under designed it and pull it back to where actually some of the actual benefits that might have been put into design around sustainability get stripped out because, well, there's a slightly lower cost one that we can stick in and that'll take some of our upfront costs out. So I suppose it's trying to find that balance between the two. And again, it's having the decision makers educated around both, I suppose, understanding both sides of that equation and being able to navigate that space. So again, part of the reason for the webinar is to inform people and make sure they're aware of the options so that they can make good decisions.
Actually, that's a very good point you've raised there. And I've often wondered, is there a space within the selection criteria for public buildings for exactly that kind of sustainability mark to be assigned? Because a lot of the PPP projects and public type tendering exercises are heavily weighted in favor of cost, which of its nature then will drive the proposer towards possibly last generation technology because it'll be cheap. So we're in a competitive bidding process on behalf, you know, into a public project, and you know, no criticism of government departments trying to get the best bang for their buck for the taxpayer, but is the process leading them to a place by not considering the sustainability and the, if you like, the long-term ownership cost of that building on the public course? By ignoring that, is it driving us towards suboptimal choices in terms of final contract award?
Yeah, and I would certainly say, and I've been involved in a couple of bids in the last year, and I would say there's certainly that pressure into the public procurement offering. You know, unfortunately, I don't think they've gotten their scoring metrics right yet. So fingers crossed we see a change there, because I think that's going to be important going forward. So again, Nathan, thanks for your comment there. So again, thanks a million, guys, for joining in today. Really appreciate it. Hope you all have a very good Christmas, and I will see you all at our next webinar in January, where we're going to look at leadership and how we get leadership to step up and take the responsibility and make sure that collective of the willing is pulled together so that change can be implemented.
Thanks, Bernard.
We're going to jump in. There is a networking event for anyone that wants to go into the networking. So you can jump into the networking room. And if not, if I don't see you there, I'll see you between now and Christmas. Again, thanks to Paul, Peter, Tony, and Paul.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.